George Kilpatrick Inspiration for the Nation, celebrating people we feel good about. A new year and a new you, putting 2020 in the rearview mirror and putting 2021 on blast. And when we thought about who could we talk to really set the year off right, get us in the right mindset, because part of what we have to consider for this is letting go and moving forward. So I couldn't think of a better person to talk to than Arel Moodie, a best-selling author, featured speaker, TEDx, Art of Likability podcast. The brother is bad. He does so much in the community. He's been at the White House. He's done everything. There's so much I could say about Arel Moodie, but more importantly, this brother is walking inspiration from the college success program that he has, from being from Brooklyn, New York, from graduating from SUNY Binghamton, from speaking all over this country, inspiring youth, inspiring adults, inspiring companies. This brother is a bad brother. And so when I thought about one of the individuals who I could bring into this conversation to really help us to set off 2021 right, Arel Moodie, I'm so glad to have you on here to talk about this, to do what we have to do, to make some things happen, to change some lives. Arel, you want to change some lives in 2021?
Listen, man, there's no better person that I could imagine, kicking this year off with than you. I have to say this even before we begin. I owe a lot of gratitude, and I'm indebted to you. Back in 2009, when I first came out with my book, you were my literally first media interview about that book, and I don't know if you remember that, but I do, and it really impacted me so much then, and I've had an incredible ride since that book came out. So I'm so excited to have this full circle moment where we can do some inspiration for folks in 2021.
I really appreciate that, and I thank you for that. And that's part of what we want to do, is to build momentum for folks. So let's just talk about what 2020 was for folks, Arel, what it was for you, what it was for so many people. How do we not bring that into 2021? For some of us, it's very difficult, but there was a lot, and it's still going on, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
how do you take a look? How do you put 2020 in
Right.
perspective?
So if you want to put 2020 in perspective, let's first look at the context of what 2020 was. We had social unrest, we had racial unrest, we had political unrest, we had health unrest,
Mm-hmm.
we had isolation and mental health unrest, we had deaths in numbers. That was all in 1 year.
Right.
And I mean, and we're not even talking about the fires that happened in Australia that everyone forgot about, that happened at the
Right.
beginning of the year, right? That like devastated most of that. We're not even, touching upon losing Kobe Bryant in January. The earthquakes that smashed Puerto Rico, and I mean, it was a lot, right? And I think everybody's situation is very unique and different. So I want to share, one, some ideas that I think are going to be very helpful, but two, share it with the sensitivities that
Mm-hmm.
everybody's unique situation is very specific in what 2020 meant to them. As you and I were chatting, for a lot of people, it was the best professional year,
Right.
worst personal year.
Right.
Worst personal year, worst professional year, maybe best personal year, and everything in between. So I think the first thing is to get perspective that if you are actually available to listen and hear this message right now, you're one of the lucky ones because you made it out of 2020.
Yeah.
There's a lot, I mean, hundreds of thousands of humans that unfortunately that was their last year, and for many prematurely. So I think the first thing is to just kind of ground ourselves in perspective, that if we have the unique ability to listen to this, the first thing you realize is you've made it through. And I genuinely have held on to this belief that says, if I can make it through the worst, I can make it through the best.
Mm.
And if you can make it through 2020, if, number one, like, you're one of the toughest people alive. literally, right? Like you've made it through. And if you have people you love who didn't make it through, I think you have a duty to them to make sure that their passing was not forgotten, and that you use their spirit and you use their memory to drive you in 2021. Because I think that our loved ones wouldn't want us to stall. They would want us to go further. So we have to mourn, and we have to uh, take care of all of that loss that happened, which is real. But then I think we have to refocus and say, for all of our family and friends and community members that did not make it out of 2020, what do we want to do, and how do we want to live in their honor,
Hmm.
so that 2021 is a redemptive year for everyone?
Yeah, and of course, this is personal for me. I lost my mom in 2020 to due to COVID, and
Yeah,
it seems like every time I during this 2020, every time I looked on Facebook,
yeah,
somebody else was lost, and I never felt so connected to so many people this year, whether they
yeah,
passed from COVID or not. So many people. Every time I read about somebody losing a loved one, it was another like, oh man, you too. Oh man, you too. So that feeling of how do I live in their honor, or how do I not be so affected, was, as I was listening to you, I was thinking about how each person uh, each person uh, was a life lost, and how do you honor that? How do you
yeah.
recover from that? And how do you not get stuck in that, even as we mourn?
Yeah, and I think what you're touching upon is a really, again, I want to be very careful with certain words I use. I don't want to
Hmm.
say blessing when
Hmm.
there's pain connected to it. But one of the unique things that I might think as a social blessing is that I think this is the first time, at least in my lifetime, that the globe has a shared experience.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I may know what it's like to be a man, and I don't know what it's like to be a woman, but we all know what it's like to be in this pandemic, right? We all know what it's like to have someone affected and to lose someone, or at least know someone who's lost someone. So I don't think there's ever been, and again, I might be overreaching with this statement, a shared global experience that created a sense of humanity for all of us in some form. So I
Hmm.
think that there's a lot that we can actually build upon that shared experience if we use it the right way.
How about your own life? What did you observe about how you had to move in 2020 that
Yeah.
you're using now to propel you in 2021?
So here's what's interesting. I'll tell you a very quick story. It was March 12th. I remember it very specifically. I was flying from Syracuse to Florida, West Palm Beach, to do a keynote in the evening. I
Hmm.
jump on a plane, and Syracuse, we were connecting somewhere.
Right.
So I connected in Atlanta, and I'm in Atlanta. I'm on the tarmac, and I get a call from my host. It's probably around 11 a.m. The event's at 8 p.m. that night. And usually, I give calls, or they call me just to update on travel. They called me, and I said, "Hey, don't worry. I'm on the tarmac. I'm in Atlanta. I'm heading to Florida." And they said, "Arel, I don't know how to tell you this, but the event's canceled."
Mm.
And I was like, I'm literally on the airplane in Atlanta. Like, if this conversation happened 5 minutes ago, I could turn around and go home, right?
Right.
So I fly to Florida, and literally every single one of my speaking engagements for the rest of the year, starting that day, every phone call, cancel, cancel,
Cancel,
cancel,
cancel,
cancel.
cancel.
So imagine your entire, for me, my speaking calendar is a big part of my business and my livelihood. And I've never experienced anything where in March, where I'm looking ahead like this is going to be a great year, it went from that to zero, right? So I go to Florida, I spend the evening there, I fly home, and then I have to take a long, hard look at what happens now. I've I've never had this. I don't have the skill set yet because I've never built with how do you build this up? And everyone I spoke to, listen, I understand you're canceling. I can't be mad at you for doing so. Maybe we could do it again next year, hopefully, or
Hmm.
whatever it is.
Hmm.
But for me on a professional level, I had to really be faced with, well, how agile am I? I'm an entrepreneur. That's who I am. Well, am I really an entrepreneur? Let's find out. Can I create in this devastation. And I think that, and again, I'm being sensitive, every situation is unique, but I think entrepreneurs, they look for opportunity, and they will figure it out. You have to, you just can't sit around, because that's not going to solve this problem. So in many ways, and I shifted totally into the digital world, built online education platforms, courses to teach people from what I've learned about how to build online businesses, and started teaching that. And then a couple of months later, virtual keynotes came back, and it came back really strong. I mean, super strong. I know a lot of people virtually who are having a great experience with it. So I was able to package my information, create online courses, sell those online courses to people who wanted to, learn from what I've built over the last 5 years doing online courses. And then the virtual keynotes came back. So there was this dual world. So what was fascinating is that even though there was about a 2-month period where it was wild, right? Like just zero like sense of the future, it started really kind of cementing. Now, here's what's fascinating, and I'll share this because I think it's worth sharing. A couple of weeks ago, I'm driving in my car with my 2 sons, and my youngest son, who's 5 years old, says, "Dad, I'm so grateful for Corona."
Mm.
And I said, "Okay, son, why is that?"
Ooh,
And
I know where this is going.
he said, "Daddy, because you're home more."
Yeah.
And that, like, I'm driving, I'm getting emotional, and I realized that that impacted him, because this was the first year. And for anyone who had a business or a career where you travel a lot, that par for the course is, I'm not going to make every birthday. I'm not going to make every holiday. I'm just not, like, my schedule is not going to allow me to be there. And that's what we accept. This year was the first year that I was home for every single holiday, for every single birthday. I did an event in California and Montana, and literally tucked my kids in to bed every single night instead of calling them from a hotel. So it's perspective, but that's how, my life shifted tremendously, as you start realizing, well, what's really important to me? Is there a new way to do things? So what will be fascinating to find out is, with this year that's ahead of us, in the future, is this the new normal? Do we go back to what we've been doing? Is it a hybrid? I mean, we'll all find out together. But I think that ultimately we have to decide, who do we want to be in difficult times? And for me, I was like, if I'm an entrepreneur, I have to be an entrepreneur, and I have to figure it out.
Wow, that's a powerful question. Arel Moodie, bestselling author, speaker, giving us some tools for 2021 to move forward on inspiration for the nation. And I love that question. Who do I want to be no matter what's going on externally, right? Because that's really the test of who we are. And I think you said you wanted to be careful, but you said, how do I create even in the midst of these external challenges, these what might appear to be devastating times? And so let me ask you this.
Yep.
Many businesses were not able to retool
Yep.
like you were. Many people have lost their jobs
Yep.
because of the pandemic, or the businesses are closed, especially those in the food and beverage industry. I'm talking about restaurants in particular, had to close, or
Yep.
made the decision to close, or they made the decision to pivot at this point. If you were coaching them, what would you be saying to them right now? Whether if they're an entrepreneur, maybe they'll figure it out, but if they're someone who was those employees of those companies that closed, what do you
Yep.
what if they're on the line with you trying to figure out their next move? What are you saying to them?
Yeah, I think what I'm saying to them is, I'm gonna be so there's people whose business is closed, and I want to be very sensitive to, that's not easy. That is really, really emotionally, to have to let people go, to close something down. Like, I think the Mission was open
Yes,
for 20 years
right,
and
right.
closed. Like, that's horrific. What I would tell them is, I would be in their face, but by their side with this statement, because what I'm about to say, I know can come across as potentially controversial. But I think that sometimes the truth is, what we make it to be. And this is what I would say my truth is. I would say that we have to be very aware of what our relationship is with education. And let me explain what I mean by that. I think all of us will tell youth, You got to educate yourself. You got to learn. You got to read books. You got to believe in yourself. This is a period of time where we have to apply that to our own lives as adults. Okay, you've been doing something one way. You gotta educate yourself on what are people doing? How are they pivoting right now? I know a lot of people that are afraid of technology. Everything's learnable. Everything's learnable. So like, hey, listen, you need to learn how to get on Zoom, and you got to learn how to use, the feature and the microphones, and
Right.
getting it just right. And it's annoying because you don't know it,
Right.
but we have to learn it. I'll tell you an example. There's a YouTuber named Mr. Beast. Have you heard of him?
Mr. Who?
Mr. Beast. He's a very, very popular
Eh,
YouTuber.
oh, well, I guess I'll find out in a minute.
Check him out. Yeah, he does kind of zany stuff, very, very popular, gains traction like wild. But he did something in the pandemic which could never have been done before, I think, in the history of the world. And that the timing was right for it. There's something called ghost kitchens. Have you heard of this term before? Ghost kitchens.
I haven't heard that either.
Yeah, so a ghost kitchen is a really interesting phenomenon. They've been around for some time, but they've really gained popularity in the pandemic. A ghost kitchen is a facility, a restaurant that's set up solely for making food for delivery.
Mm.
They have no chairs, they have no ambiance, they've got no nothing. You can't come in there and order. They make the food solely for delivery only. So there's these ghost kitchens all over the country, right? All over the country. Now, watch what happens. You have the ghost kitchen. Again, educating ourselves about how they work would be really important if someone's in the restaurant business. The next is we have something that we're probably all familiar with, delivery apps, Uber
Yep.
Eats, Postmates, and all that stuff. So we have these delivery only. So every business now has multiple delivery people, right? So
Yeah.
this ghost kitchen, what he did is created something called Mr. Beast Burger, which he launched to 300 ghost kitchens. So he gives his, and again, I don't know the details of how their relationship was, but this is what I imagine. He gives the formula to how to make his food, the recipe to these, he contacts these ghost kitchens. They're very easy to find. Says, will you produce my food? They go, yes. The ghost kitchen produces the food. The delivery people from Uber Eats and Postmates and all those people pick the food up. It's delivery only. So he's literally able to say, here's the recipe.
Here's the recipe. I think we have a little technical thing here. We're going to pause for a minute.
So he has the recipe. He gives it out to all these ghost kitchens who agree to make his burger and deliver his burger in the way that he says. People go on to the apps where these ghost kitchens are, like in those cities. They can buy the food, get the delivery. So literally, he's launched a 300 location restaurant in the pandemic, but with almost none of the traditional overhead of a restaurant. So what I would encourage people to do is know that, stuff like this, humans are adaptable. Like we will figure things out. We've learned to live in the North Pole. We've learned to live in the desert. I think we will figure these things out. But what we have to do as individuals on the front line is ask ourselves, what's my relationship with learning about what's happening now? What's my relationship with education? What's my relationship with learning something that maybe I've been doing something the same way for the last 15 years?
Mm-hmm.
And now this pandemic has forced me to say, if I keep doing it the way I've been doing it, I'm not going to make it. What options exist for me? And I believe that if you pay attention to industry trends, so if you are in any particular industry, if you're not subscribed to newsletters from people paying attention to trends, if you're not using Google keywords to get alerts and Google alerts about what's happening in your restaurant industry to your inbox, if you're not reading blogs, if you're not staying as up to date as possible, this is the time where you will be left and you will not get it. And I genuinely believe that the next couple of months, we're going to see wild innovation in terms of how people are surviving, making things happen.
Is that because, Arel, people if people are taking the time to do that research, because what I'm hearing you say is this is no time to do things the way you've always done them.
Right.
There's a book out, and my sister sent it to me. What got you here will not get you there.
Yes.
Something to that effect,
Mhm.
right? Right. And so you're really telling us that it's a new day. And I guess we always knew that, but to actually put those words into action, to make those steps actionable,
Yes.
is the biggest challenge. Because people will say, well, I don't have time, or it's like you said, everything's learnable, but it's too hard, or I can't figure out the time, or I'm binge watching something, which is an interesting thing, right? We have the
Yeah.
time to do that, right? We don't have time to do the things that you said
Correct.
that on,
Because
but
it's
you are,
uncomfortable.
you're
It's
right.
uncomfortable.
And the other thing you said, or that I heard you say, is that we can also make it accessible in a way. Google can just send those things to our attention, and then but we have to make time to read it. So a lot of it is, it's the work, man. We got to put the work in, right? That's what you're telling me.
We can't be afraid of the work. One of the things that I learned from 2008, which was, really a blessing for me, is that in 2008, when we had the Great Recession and we had the real estate bubble, that's the closest thing in my recent memory to what
Hmm.
this was, that big recession. I remember hearing that there were more millionaires made during the recession
Hmm.
in any other period of time, because there are always, and this may be weird, but this is true. There are always people doing well no matter what's happening in the economy.
Hmm.
No matter what's happening in the world, there's a percentage of humans that are always doing well. So our question has to be, well, what do they know that I don't?
Right.
That's it. What are they doing, and what do they know that I don't? For example, the very first thing I did when I saw March 17th happen, and for those of you who don't know the significance of March 17th, that's the day that the stock market crashed and it hit like crazy rock bottoms. The first thing that I did is I said, I got to start buying a bunch of stocks right now. And I put a bunch of money into the stock market because literally, again, this goes down to historical relevance. Now, of course, past performance does not indicate future performance, right?
Right. Right.
But historically, 47 times the stock market has hit an all-time low. It was always followed by an all-time high. Always. An
Mm.
all-time low was always followed by all-time high. So I remember in '08, I didn't really have a bunch of money back then. So I was like disappointed because everyone's like, yo, now's the time to buy like houses and stocks and all that kind of stuff. And I just couldn't do it. When March hit, I was like, this is the moment. So I was nervous, right? Because I'm like, I'm putting money in and I'm seeing the stock market go down and down and down. But now, if anyone is following stock market, it's at an all-time high. So stocks that were worth $2 in March are worth $250 in, right now. Now, will the stock market stay up? No one can predict it, but one of the things to pay attention to is, again, trends. And this comes to education. So I'll give you another trend. Now, I hope this doesn't happen because this is horrific. And I hope it doesn't happen. If it does happen, there may be some people who might be able to do some good in it. For those of you who don't know, there's a potential, and it may not happen because of the stimulus package that was passed, but there's a potential that a bunch of homes are going to go into foreclosure in the first quarter of
Right.
2021. It's just on the table. It's just potentially there because people couldn't be foreclosed on or evicted because of the stimulus package that was passed in 2020, but that kind of extended protection to December 31st, 2020. Now, how will it all play out? I'm not 100% sure, but there's a potential that there's going to be a bunch of foreclosures, which I hope doesn't happen, which would be horrific. If it does happen, it then becomes a buyer's market. There becomes a lot of properties that you can get on a very, very inexpensive, small thing. Now, not everyone's in a position to buy real estate. I understand that. If you were thinking about buying investment properties or potentially moving and you couldn't do it in the past year, paying attention to those things are going to be really important. Hopefully it's not that, but these are the things about education and learning trends and understanding what's happening. And again, everyone's in different industries. But if you can pay attention to what industry leaders are saying, what are the trends, and being open to learning even when it hurts your brain, I think you're going to find an opportunity that you may not have found if you just kept doing things the way you've been.
Talking to Arel Moodie, best-selling authors, motivational speaker, tours all over the country, helping people to change people's life, unlocking the potential that's within them. And so one of the things you talked about really understanding and getting to know who we are better. And some people discover new talents, they let go of some things in 2020. What are the keys to this discovery that you can actually use to get you where you want to go, whether that's a wealth building strategy, whether
Yeah.
that's a job you really like, a career you really like, a relationship you really want. People discovered some things about themselves and they let go of some things.
Yep. And there's something that's not talked about enough, which I think dictates almost all the decisions that we make, which is, what is my identity? So I want
Mm,
you to catch this. If if my identity is, and I'm gonna kind of leverage, because I know you've made a great pivot, right? So if your identity is, I'm a radio personality, so I've built this incredible career as a radio personality. But now this thing called podcasting comes around. And if you go, no, 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 my identity is I'm a radio personality.
right,
I'm not a podcaster.
right.
I'm a radio personality. If we hold on to that identity, it doesn't matter all of the books that you read. It doesn't matter all the hacks and strategies and tech stuff. That podcasting thing goes against your identity. And if it does, there's too much friction for you to make that change. So I think that the very first thing is for us to get clear on, how do I identify who I am? And a simple way to do that from a professional way is, if you walk into a room and someone says, what do you do for a living? Or what do you do? What is your natural first response?
Hmm.
Is it to say, and this was big for me, because when the virtual world hit, and I built the large majority of my identity as being a professional speaker.
That is in front of people in live settings.
Right. This is my identity. This is who I am. And then when I had to go into this virtual world, and, do I tell people I'm a coach first? Do I tell people I'm a virtual presenter? Like, who am I? And I think for a lot of people, they don't realize how powerful that I am statement is. And there's a great quote that says, whatever follows I am is what shapes your reality. So if you say I am a father, and that's part of your identity, then you being there for your kids it's a non-question.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, we know a lot of people who are biologically fathers but are not involved in their kids' life. But I
Right.
would argue that their identity isn't first, I'm a father.
Hmm.
They may say, well, I have kids, but their identity isn't, I am a father. So we have to get clear with, what are our current identities? How do we see ourselves? How do we expect the world to see us? And how do we want to show up in the world? And then ask ourselves, how does that match up with what the world is currently giving me?
Ah,
Because if my identity doesn't match with what the world's giving me, I got to figure out how to become a new version of me.
so how did you answer the question?
Right. So what I've done is say, this is a good kind of exercise, right? And I'll show you how I got to my answer. There's a phrase that I guess it's been around forever, but I just didn't know it till recently, which is called Magnus Opus, right? Or
Hmm.
Magnus, am I saying it right? I could be butchering it. But basically it's like your gift to the world. It's your big literary work or your big piece of art. So, what is it that you want to give to the world? What is it that you want to be remembered by ultimately? There's personal answers to that, and there's professional answers to that, and there's contribution answers to that. And I realized, for me, one of the things that I care about more than anything is impacting people through public speaking. It's my biggest care. So what I've moved into is helping others decide what is their message, how do they want to share it, so they can put their impact into the world. So for me, I've moved into being primarily a speaker coach and speaker. So I still do speaking,
Hmm.
but instead of it being speaker and then speaker coach, it shifted professionally, where that speaker coach is first and the speaking is second. It seems subtle, but it's a huge identity shift.
Here's what you say on your website: helping people become powerful, authentic, and self-creating and
Yes.
more awesome, right?
Yeah.
So is that your identity now?
So that is what I consider my mission.
Uh-huh.
This is what I'm set to do. How do I help people who feel not powerful or feel weak feel powerful? How do I help them be their authentic self? And how do I help them not rely on anyone else, but realize that they self create? No matter what I do, what I argue is that is my mission. The medium in which I do that, the message in which I do that can always change, but the mission always stays the same.
And that was the kind of clarity you needed to be able to accept that this new virtual reality, or this combination of this live and virtual reality, was that the way that you could move past this? Well, if I'm a live speaker and if all I do is live speaking, and if there's no live speaking, then I don't do any live speaking. So in other words, was that why you were, is that how you
Yeah,
made that
what
connection?
what happened is I think that what the pandemic did is it sped up a lot of decision making for people.
Uh-huh.
I think what you'll see for a lot of people, and again, just take a look at a lot of the people that you know. A lot of the things that they chose to do in the pandemic, they were thinking about doing anyway. They were
Mm-hmm.
hoping, I'd like to do this at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Pandemic hits, and then you go, oh, well, now I got to do that, right? So now I have to speed up this thing that may have been a 5 or 10 year goal. I
Right.
need to turn that into a right now goal. So I think what happened for me in the virtual world is I've said to myself, I want to impact more people, but I want to be home more. That was always kind of one of my big
Mm,
struggles.
okay.
I love traveling, I love impacting people, but now I have 2 sons.
Hmm.
And I kept asking myself, I have to figure out how to impact people, but be home for my family. That was a question that's been in my mind for years. So what the pandemic did is it accelerated, because before it's like, yo, this is the only way I know how to do it. This is what I'm best at. This is what I
Hmm.
love. This is what I'm great at. The
Right.
pandemic made me go, you have to figure this out now, or you're not going to survive. So I think what it did is it sped up a timeline of a secret desire. And I think for many people, if you look at how they interacted with the world, the same thing happened for them.
I think, Arel, when people look at you and they think about, wow, this brother's got it going on, and don't realize that for many of the people that you're talking to, your background is very similar to theirs. And 2020, I was talking to somebody the other day, 2020 magnified some of the challenges that we had. We saw disparities in income and things of that nature. A lot of that was magnified in 2020. So it's kind of a hybrid question in that, one, how do you connect to people the real uh, way that you grew up, in terms of, I'm very similar to some of the experiences that you've had, and yet how do people recover from some of the major setbacks that they had in 2020? And if they if a bad situation got worse for them, where
Yeah.
do they find this little opportunity, or how do you move? Because let's say for many of us, it's going from here to here. I got my hands, I'm going up, up, up. But what
Mhm.
if you way over here and
Yeah.
then you went even lower than where
Yeah.
you were? How do I walk out of that? How do I start from the bottom? What did Drake say? I started from the bottom, now I'm here.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you went from the bottom to the bottom?
Right. And
Or
many people, whatever they thought the bottom was,
right,
2020 became the bottom of the bottom of the bottom.
right, right.
And I hold on to a few things. Growing up in the projects on welfare in Brooklyn, New York, witnessing friends get murdered, friends go to prison. There's a certain level of um, one grit that you build because of it, and
Hmm.
there's also a level of disparity. Honestly, it's literally equal. You build this incredible sense of like grit, because if I can make it through this, what can I make it through? But you also build this sense of like almost wanting to give up and wanting to just not try and not care. So I think that the first thing that I would do is I'm big on perspective. A lot of times when I do presentations at businesses and organizations or even in schools, I always focus on this idea of everything is perspective. Everything is not what it is. Everything is how you choose to look at it. Because I might say, listen, have you ever been through something bad before? have you ever been through a horrific experience? Maybe not exactly like this, but have you ever been through it, and have you gotten through it? If you
Mm,
have, you can do this. If you're, and a lot of people got into deep debt. I know people who've lost their home during the pandemic and are now literally
sure.
nomads. They're just kind of driving around and trying to figure it out, living out of their car, and trying to turn an adventure out of it. And I would say that no matter how bad it gets, if you're not dead, you have an opportunity
Mm,
to change. You have an opportunity to dig out of it. Is it going to be simple? No, it's going to be worth it. So I think for anyone who's been at the bottom of the bottom, and again, this is me now speaking very direct with a sense of love and compassion, but because some people may need to hear this, we either excel at excuses or results, but never both.
mm-hmm.
We either will excel at, oh, but I lost my job and there's no opportunity and no one's hiring. You either excel at that, or you excel at, yes, that happened, and I am going to figure it out because I'm doing something every damn day. I'm paying the dues for success every damn day. And this is just the reality of it. There's going to be periods of times where you work and at the end of the day, there are no results.
Mm,
And that is life. And especially, I remember I saw a quote which I loved. This is talking about entrepreneurship, but I think it's equivalent to a lot of things. Entrepreneurship is one of the only careers that I know of where you can work 80 hours a week and make $0, right? That's just life. And right now, there's an opportunity where you can work for 40 days and see zero results. And then you have to ask yourself, will I still try on that 41st day?
mm-hmm.
Because what I believe is that life is like a coin. There's a heads or tails. I flip the coin. I either get heads, I get tails. I either get a win or I get a loss. That's just what it is. I can't get 50 heads in a row and I can't get 50 tails in a row. So as long as I keep trying, something will hit. But if I try once and then quit, then I'm done.
You, my take from that metaphor is you just got to keep flipping the coin, or you won't get heads or tails.
Every damn
Right?
day. Every day. That's right, George. That's exactly right. So if you stop flipping the coin, you're not giving yourself either or.
Either or, right?
You're not giving yourself the chance. So what that means is, and this is where it gets tough, for the person who has submitted, say, job applications for the last 30 days in a row and received zero responses. That's tough. And someone has to make the decision of, you know what, maybe I'm in the wrong industry, or maybe I need to do something in addition to job searching to build my skill set or build my brand. One of the things I will tell people, and this is a quick aside, but it's on topic. We're living in a world today where if you can build a strong enough brand, it takes care of everything else.
Yeah.
If you have a strong enough, it's never really been like this. There's always been a gatekeeper to your brand. There's always, so like if I wanted to be famous, some movie production company had to green light me. If I wanted to publish something, a magazine had to green light me. Now the only gatekeeper is social media algorithm. That's the only
Mm-hmm.
gatekeeper. That's like, I can create content, publish it, and if I take the time, again, this is learning, to learn how the YouTube algorithm works, to learn how the Instagram algorithm works, which it's out there, and they care about, click-through rates, and they care about how long someone listens or watches, like those things they care about. If you can show that, and like, for example, with YouTube, you need to get to about 1,000 subscribers, and I think it's 4,000 hours of total watch time. Then you can start monetizing your videos. So if you can start creating content, organically, that can get you past that hump, then they start pushing and promoting your content for you. And as long as you're creating content that gets watched, and they give you all the analytics on the back end, you can start creating content that gets more engagement. So this is the point that I make with that. Today, you have to build your brand or expertise as a thought leader if you want to make it easier for you to get work. So let's say you're an incredible mechanic, but you can't get hired at any mechanic spot.
Right.
You got to start thinking about, maybe I need to create YouTube videos where I show people, here's how you change your oil, here's how you, and I don't know mechanical terms, so I'm going bad here, here's how you fix a gasket and your tie
Right.
rod, right, all that stuff. Because then when you apply for a job, you can say, yeah, I'm the creator behind this particular, brand. And now you become way more interesting and exciting because they know of your knowledge base versus trying to kind of believe what a piece of paper has to say. So for anyone who's struggling right now, this may be the opportunity for you to not necessarily become a professional YouTuber or professional blogger, but to start creating content that helps build your brand and not just post pictures of NBA highlights or twerk videos or whatever Instagram like numbness, but create good content. Now's the time to do that because you need to position yourself above everyone else.
All right, Arel, now the time is for people to get their pen and paper out because they got some work to do. So let's give people, in addition to all of the things you've said already, there's two things I want to do, and I have about 4 minutes, I think. All right.
Sure.
So here's what we want to do. Two things. One, what's next in terms of what might we be thinking about in terms of innovations? George, these are some things that are coming up on the horizon that you can get on and be on top of what's going on. But two, what are listeners, viewers, what are some things that they can do right now, wherever they are, whether at the bottom or whether they're at the top and trying to go to a new level? What are the two things that will, if you can,
Yep.
and if you can put those two together, go ahead and do that too.
Yeah,
We got
absolutely.
about 3-4 minutes.
What I would say for folks to do right now is, because there's principles and then there's specifics, right? The principles are universal. The specifics will change. So what I would recommend everyone do, number one, go into Google and whatever industry you're in, restaurant, barber, whatever, just type in barber industry news, mechanic industry news, radio industry news, whatever it is, and see what are the blogs, there's always someone talking about something. There's an association publishing reports, polling their members to find out what in the heck's happening. Okay. So that's number one. Find out just where are those pieces of content that you can keep track of what's current. The second thing is I would encourage you to really start learning from people. One of the things that I would tell someone to do is whatever industry you're in, find 5 or 6 of the top people that you know or have access to, invite them onto a Zoom call just to talk about the state of affairs of the industry, right? Hey, I'm in the restaurant business. Let's jump on a Zoom, all 5 of us restaurant owners locally, and let's talk about what are we doing? How are we staying alive? What are we looking forward to? Because there's always someone who's going to be able to share one little tidbit or one little thing. I mean, everyone and their mama keeps telling me about the Clubhouse app, which I haven't gotten because I have an Android, so I can't, I'm not cool enough to get on it because they don't
Oh,
have
is that just iPhone? Because I'm on Clubhouse.
it's just iPhone. But
Oh,
I've literally had like 5 people in the last week message me and say, "Oh, well, you gotta get on Clubhouse. You gotta I'll send you an invite." And I'm like, when they send it, they make it on Android, I'll get on there. But it's a place where people are communicating. So if someone can get a Clubhouse app, you can get direct access to really, really cool people, via voice, which is cool. So being aware of these new things and not just going, oh, well, like a lot of people look at like TikTok and go, well, that's stupid, so I'm not going to get involved in it. I would say that whether you think it's stupid or not, you have to stay on top of industry trends. So you can choose to reject things like TikTok, which is fine, but you may not want to reject things like Clubhouse. So you got to stay abreast of what's happening in the industry, and you want to connect with people who are in the industry, find out what they're doing, because one person could say one thing, and changes everything. So you gotta educate yourself, and this is how you do it.
Arel Moodie is America's favorite speaker, one of America's favorite speakers. ArelMoodie.com. Arel, I know you got some books out. What book would you like people to be aware of today?
There's a lot of cool things. I'll do one that's a personal project of mine, just a personal fun project. My wife and I came out with a children's book. So I've written books on student success. I've written books on, interviewing. I have podcasts on myself. But one of the things that I think is really cool is for any parent listening that has a child that specifically deals with meltdowns or temper tantrums or things like that. One of the things that I've observed more than anything is that with everyone being home, the home situation has been wild, dealing with temper tantrums and meltdowns and kids freaking out and parents freaking out and there being all that stuff. So I care about families. So there's a book called The Peculiar Purple Penguin. It's a book my wife and I wrote. You can go on Amazon. You can order a copy right now for you or someone you love. And the reason why I think that's so important, because if your home is chaotic, you can't be the best version of you. And this is specifically set up to help little kids deal better with their emotions. It's a strategy. It's really powerful. It's backed by science. There's a whole a PhD in the book who co-signed everything that we're teaching. So what I would encourage is, if you know someone who has a small child who's working at home, who's feeling the chaos and they don't have the mental bandwidth to be able to learn, let's take a step before that and help kind of clear out that emotional space. And I would highly recommend people check out The Peculiar Purple Penguin on Amazon, or go to purplepenguinbook.com, and you can see a lot more about what we're doing there. It's a personal project of mine, and we donate the proceeds to various nonprofits. So I hope that it'll help families and help people be the best version of them.
And hopefully 2021 will be our best year ever. And the Peculiar Purple Penguin will be one way in which we can help people do
We're
that.
all due for a good year, George.
We're good. We got to do this. All right, Arel Moodie, arelmoodie.com. This is how you can find Arel Moodie virtually for right now until things check out. But Arel, really appreciate you spending some time with us and setting us right for 2021. Inspiration for the nation.